Biden's erosion of support in this state is a subject of concern for his reelection campaign. According to census data, Michigan has roughly 310,000 residents with Middle Eastern or North African ancestry, and Arab Americans can account for as much as 5% of the vote in this state, depending on turnout. New polling shows Donald Trump narrowly leads the president in the key battleground state by just 2 points. With numbers that close, though, Democrats are sounding the alarm, warning Joe Biden's handling of the war could cause voters in this crucial bloc to sit out in the November election. One local activist from Dearborn told USA Today, quote, "It is time for the president to take action, and he is failing to do so, and that's going to have political consequences."
People are not going to vote for Joe Biden on February 27th because they are really mad at him. Their cousins are dying. Their friends are dying. And it's not just Arab Americans. You're right. We are the densest Arab American state. We also have 250,000 Muslims in Michigan. We have 1.4 million African Americans. And you just saw the AME bishops going even farther in saying that we ought to suspend all aid to Israel, military aid to Israel. And then you've got 370-some thousand 18 to 24-year-old voters, all of whom are very upset. Now, these are somewhat overlapping groups, right?
Right.
But
all right, guys, so we got to talk about one of my favorite topics to discuss on this channel, an issue that I warned you guys from the beginning would be the Achilles heel of the Democrat Party and their chances of winning in the 2024 election, mainly Joe Biden being the president of the United States, which is the issue of Israel's conflict in Gaza as they are launching what they call a defense operation against Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And unfortunately, that has resulted in the deaths of tens of thousands of Palestinian civilians. And this has pissed off the far left wing of the Democrat Party, and they are actively revolting against Joe Biden because of it. They are demanding that Joe Biden make the Netanyahu-run Israeli government issue a ceasefire when it comes to the self-defense operation in the Gaza Strip. And again, we have seen how serious the progressive pro-Palestinian base of the Democrat Party is when it comes to wanting Joe Biden to force a ceasefire. Okay, we've seen massive protests across the country, some of which have been violent. Okay, we've seen a lot of hypocrisy in regards to how these violent protests are being policed. Now, again, I obviously don't support the violence, but hey, I really don't mind them protesting the Democrat Party, especially if it's going to motivate the young base of the Democrat Party to not vote for Joe Biden or Democrats in the 2024 election, which it looks like that could be a major possibility, and it could affect the outcome of the election, particularly in swing states like Michigan that have a large Muslim population. So it's not just progressives, but also Muslims / Arab Americans as well that are overwhelmingly pro-Palestinian. And because of that, they are issuing boycotts and threats to Joe Biden that, hey, if you don't change course with your support of this war, we're not going to vote for you, which is good for Trump, okay? And that's my position on this. I don't want you guys to get it twisted. What is happening overseas, regardless of which side of the conflict you are on, okay, or whether or not you even care all that much, regardless, for me personally, okay, this benefits Trump, right? The dysfunction, the civil war in the Democrat Party over this issue benefits Trump, and I want to see how this plays out in regards to helping Trump win, okay? So again, this is why I'm rooting for the dysfunction in the Democrat Party, and why I love covering this story so much is because it helps Trump, right? That is my kind of cynical angle on this story. So I want people to understand, don't get it twisted. And this threat against Joe Biden has escalated to the point where they're taking the first opportunity to show Joe Biden that, hey, we are actually not going to vote for you. Like, we're serious about not showing up to support you in the 2024 general election if you don't change course, because Miss Rashida Tlaib, who is a Palestinian congresswoman from Michigan, she has organized a boycott. She is openly calling for a boycott of the primary or of voting for Joe Biden in the Democrat primary to show Joe Biden that they are serious about not showing up to vote for him in the 2024 election. Take a look.
It's Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. I'm here at the Ford Civic Center in the city of Dearborn. I wanted to remind everyone, please know that you can early vote today until February 17th. They are open here, specifically here from 9 to 5. Check with your local clerks. There are early voting all throughout the 12th Congressional District. It is important, as you all know, to not only march against the genocide, not only make sure that we're calling our members of Congress and local electeds and passing city resolutions all throughout our country. It is also important to create a voting bloc, something that is a bullhorn to say enough is enough. We don't want a country that supports wars and bombs and destruction. We want to support life. We want to stand up for every single life killed in Gaza. I want you to think of El Shama. I want you to think of Rima. I want you to think of Sidra. I want you to think of all of the amazing young children and the people, again, lives were lost in Gaza. This is the way you can raise our voices. Don't make us even more invisible. Right now, we feel completely neglected and just unseen by our government. If you want us to be louder, then come here and vote uncommitted.
Yeah, so you see that, you heard that. Now, Miss Rashida Tlaib is telling voters to vote uncommitted, okay? So to show up and to say, hey, you know what? We're not going to vote for Joe Biden, which is essentially a warning shot to Joe Biden that, hey, if you don't change the course of action in regards to supporting Israel with this war, then we're not going to show up for you in the 2024 election. And this is a big, big, big deal because Michigan was a swing state that Trump narrowly lost in 2020 by about 150,000 to 200,000 votes. Now, there are about 200,000 Muslim Arab Americans in Michigan that are registered to vote, and about 145,000 of them voted in the 2020 election. So if they don't show up to vote for Joe Biden, or if some of them vote for Trump, that could actually swing the outcome of the Michigan election. Okay, I mean, this is actually a very important voter block for Joe Biden in an important swing state that is absolutely a must win, okay, for Republicans and Democrats. And with that being said, nobody should be surprised that the mainstream liberal media, particularly MSNBC, which is an arm of the White House, is coming out and trashing Rashida Tlaib, attacking a fellow progressive because she is stepping out of line with the Biden administration and pushing back against the Biden agenda, actually telling people to not vote for Joe Biden in a primary. They're pissed. Take a look.
So in a new video, it was posted to X, Democratic Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib is telling her constituents to vote uncommitted instead of voting for President Biden in the Michigan primary, Dawn. Any concerns that Michigan voters who followed Tlaib's advice think it applies to the general election too?
No, well, yes, because you're talking to a voter who's not extraordinarily informed, and there might be some confusion there. But let's talk about how the realities of politics works in Washington, D.C. I got a lot of friends and family in Detroit. I care a lot about that proud Black community. What up, though, to all the folks in Detroit? When Jalen Rose Leadership Academy and Wayne State and Cass Tech don't get the proper appropriations from the Democratic administration, the Democratic president, remember it's because your Democratic congresswoman told them to not vote for the Democratic president in the primary. And she won't have the excuse that, well, I was saying primary, not general. You don't slap the president in the face and then expect to be treated as a member of the caucus in good standing. And so Rashida Tlaib is not there to represent the squad. She's not there to represent Palestine. While there's merit in all those things, you're there to represent your hometown constituency in the city of Detroit. And I will tell all my friends and family in Detroit that your congresswoman has failed you and frankly embarrassed you, and there could potentially be ramifications.
So, David, given Dawn saying that, little concern this could spill over, this advice and this suggestion from Rashida Tlaib could spill over to the general election, how much could the opposition in general from within his own party hurt President Biden in the campaign?
To defeat Joe Biden. I'm a Sunday optimist. I don't like to be a sourpuss, but if you want to see Donald Trump beat Joe Biden, then you have voices of Charlemagne and Rashida Tlaib questioning Joe Biden's leadership, suggesting he's not fit for re-election. That's how you do it. Democrats beating themselves. I mean, right now, Democrats have been given a historic opportunity with an alliance of independents and disaffected Republicans that showed up with the Democratic coalition in 18 and 20 and 22. And you're telling me going into 2024 that a sitting Democratic congresswoman and a leading voice on the left are going to say, we don't know about our guy. Maybe we shouldn't support him. That's a bunch of hot garbage, Alex. And if those voices don't fall in line, don't expect the coalition to be there in November that you need to defeat Donald Trump.
Yeah, so you seen that, you heard that. Okay, they are hot, right? They're pissed off with Rashida Tlaib. Okay, expect Rashida Tlaib to potentially be under investigation for something, right? For falling out of line with the Biden administration. Okay, we've seen what happens when people do that. Like, for example, Cori Bush, they went after her. Eric Adams, they're going after him. You know, if you do not fall in line, you can be subject to some type of criminal investigation. That is what Joe Biden does to his political opponents. So put it this way, the Biden regime, because I'm not even sure if Biden's even really calling the shots at this point. But if you come out against the Biden agenda, then we all know what happens, right? We know what the consequences are for that. You become subject to an investigation in which, you know, hey, you could be facing some charges sometime in the future. So I'm just saying, don't be surprised, right, if that happens. But with that being said, Rashida Tlaib is not only facing some backlash from the Biden administration and establishment Democrats, but she's also facing some backlash from those who are questioning her apparent opposition to Israel that they don't think is sincere. Like, for example, this guy, Dan Cohen, who is a pro-Palestinian Jewish journalist. He's calling out Rashida Tlaib for her position on Syria, where she's taking the establishment position when it comes to the opposition against Assad, who we are currently trying to overthrow, okay? And we're trying to overthrow him by arming Syrian rebels, or at least we were back in the Obama administration. That ultimately failed, and there was a whole lot of criticisms of that foreign policy because the argument was that arming these so-called moderate Syrian rebels, aka jihadis, to take out Assad was not a good strategy, because essentially you were helping out Islamic extremist groups like ISIL that were existent in the area at the time. And our foreign policy in Syria was ultimately backfiring because they weren't achieving the objective, which was to take out and to overthrow Bashir al-Assad. They were actually really helping the Islamic extremists, and then we eventually had to focus our efforts on arming rebel groups to go and fight the Islamic State, right? So again, it was just a massive cluster F of a policy with Syria that has failed. But for the most part, Syria, the Syrian regime is aligned with Iran, okay? And that's also part of the reason we don't really like them, is because they are against American interest in the region, including Israel, okay? Israel is currently, issuing attacks against Hezbollah, some of whom are in Syria, okay? They're issuing bombings and stuff like that. And Syria does represent a military threat to Israel in the area, okay? And because of that, a lot of people, a lot of progressives are questioning Rashida Tlaib and who she's actually aligned with, because her coming out and trying to push back against Assad effectively is her basically helping Israel, right? Or that is the perception. Again, this is a prime example of how our foreign policy literally makes zero sense. But this is what Dan Cohen said. He said, Rashida Tlaib is objectively allied with Israel, which regularly bombs Syria and is currently carrying out a heinous genocide against her fellow Palestinians. Syria is also a key figure in the counter-hegemonic array of forces in the region that can militarily challenge Israel. This is neocon policy in progressive garb. Tlaib is a cog in the permanent war machine. Okay, so he's basically accusing Rashida Tlaib of being a neocon for essentially supporting a policy against Syria that would be helpful towards Israel, while at the same time claiming to be against Israel when it comes to the treatment of Palestinians. Okay, and so, yeah, there's a whole lot of confusion in regards to the Middle East, which is why I think that ultimately we should try to avoid getting involved in these conflicts, because quite honestly, again, it's a cluster F, okay? But with that being said, it seems like Joe Biden is actually feeling the pressure when it comes to trying to issue a ceasefire, or to force a ceasefire, okay, so to speak, because behind closed doors, Biden doesn't really think that Netanyahu is a good guy, right? He ain't really all that fond with Netanyahu, allegedly. And behind closed doors, Joe Biden is pressuring him to issue a pause, right? I mean, they're not calling it a ceasefire, but they're calling it a pause. And this came up at the UN as there was a resolution to essentially call for Israel to issue a ceasefire. And the United States says, we're going to veto it because we're trying to negotiate a pause to help Joe Biden win the 2024 election. Take a look.
New this morning, the U.S. is warning that it will veto any resolution calling for a humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza if it comes up for a vote at the UN Security Council. Algeria has proposed such a resolution, and UN Ambassador Linda Thomas-Greenfield said in a statement that the U.S. is already working on a deal between Israel and Hamas that would bring a release of hostages and a pause in fighting for at least 6 weeks. She went on to say that the proposed resolution would not achieve the same outcomes, so the U.S. will not support it. Joining us now is CNN's political and national security analyst David Sanger. David, hello to you. Do you think voters in the U.S., the president's party, the wing of the party that wants a ceasefire, is paying close enough attention to the UN that will have any political cost for him?
Yeah, I don't think so. If he is successful at this negotiation, Victor, in which they are trying to get the hostage swaps and then what would be a 6-week pause. They're not calling it a ceasefire. They're calling it a pause because if it was a ceasefire, it would mean essentially that Israel was giving up on its objective of routing out all of Hamas. Fact remains that Israel set itself a pretty maximalist objective there. And by the assessment of most of the people I have spoken to, intelligence officials, military officials here in Munich, they really aren't very close at this point to achieving that objective. And of course, they don't have the top leadership of Hamas that planned the October 7th terror attack.
Yeah, so you've seen that, you heard that. Okay, what do I think is going on here? Well, it's obvious, okay? Joe Biden is really feeling the pressure from the progressive left in regards to getting a ceasefire, but they're not quite calling it a ceasefire, right? They're calling it a pause. So I think what they're trying to do is that they're trying to get a deal to issue a pause, at least for right now, to try to appease the left, okay? I think that's what they're going to attempt to do. That's what Biden's trying to do. And then while at the same time working out some deal to probably do another pause around the election time so that Joe Biden doesn't get hurt too much by there being fighting over there in the Middle East and this conflict. Because right now, as long as this fighting continues, his approval rating with the far left is going to continue to go down. A lot of people are not going to vote for him, and that is a threat to his presidency. So I think what he's probably going to do is try to broker this pause, at least for right now. Probably tell Netanyahu that, hey, we're going to send you more money. Okay, we're going to send you more billions of dollars in exchange for this. Okay, don't worry, we're going to get you paid. Okay, but around the election time, can you please, just kind of stop the fighting for a little bit? Just at least stop until after the election, right? And then after the election, hey, we're going to turn our head and you can do whatever you want to do, right? I really believe that that's the plan. That's what he's trying to do because at the end of the day, I mean, you do have a sitting Democratic Congresswoman that is actively campaigning for people not to vote for Joe Biden over this issue, okay? And hey, I got to be honest with you. This is probably the first time I've ever said that I support Rashida Tlaib in something, but I do. I support her in calling for her voters not to vote for Joe Biden, right? And I think that she should do that when it comes to the general election, okay? This is exactly what she should do, right? Don't just do it for the primary. Do it for the general election. Say, hey, you should not vote for Joe Biden, okay? Just sit at home, don't vote, or just, vote for somebody else. You ain't got to vote for Trump, okay? You ain't have to do that, but hey, just don't vote for Joe Biden, right? A vote that doesn't go towards Joe Biden is like a vote for Trump. So, hey, as long as Rashida Tlaib continues to divide the Democrat Party and encourage voters not to vote for Joe Biden, there's not really much I can say, right? I got to turn my head, right? The same way I turn my head when it comes to the peaceful protest that the pro-Palestinians are issuing against the Democrats. Hey, I just turn my head and say, hey, it is what it is, right? It is what it is. I love the civil war that is happening within the Democrat Party because it really just helps Trump when it comes to his electability and his chances in 2024. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.